One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going running all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to yet another edition of the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. I'm Trey Reeves. I'm joined over on the other side of the Metroplex by Mr. Garrett Turney. Garrett, got to take in a little baseball this afternoon in the third Metroplex city, Arlington. The Rangers are red hot to start the year, so we're really excited about that. But as baseball season is heating up, both in the college level and professional level, we have a lot going on in college football as well. Spring football's in full swing. We just got some rule updates dropped to us on Friday afternoon, I believe. And of course, the NFL draft, what we've been talking a lot about, is coming up this week. We are less than a week away from the start of the NFL draft. Garrett, lots going on, man. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling fantastic. I love getting out there for those baseball games at the new park. It's a nice stadium. I know it opened up a few years ago, but it still feels so new for me. And obviously, getting out for baseball is a lot of fun. We also like getting out for spring football as well. I heard you got to go down and enjoy a little spring football, post some pictures to the account. How was that for you?
Yeah, I took in about a quarter of the UT Longhorn spring football game. Got to see Arch Manning's debut. Saw a lot that we can get into a little bit later. And, I think the prevailing opinion, I saw a lot of tweets that, Texas is a national title contender off of that spring game. I don't know about that. I
got some questions about that, yeah.
I only saw one quarter live. I was down there on a school trip and the students were ready to go after about a quarter. But, we'll get into it later. We are going to have a kind of a spring roundup segment here to kick things off here in a bit. But before we do that, Garrett, we did have that big news drop this week. Dennis Dodd has kind of been all over this new timing rules update. And so if you remember I guess it's been a couple months ago now, we did have the rumor that they were considering 5 rule adjustments with regard to timing. Speaking of baseball, just so many of these sports in the era of shorter attention spans and the era of social media, looking to speed up the game and kind of package it in a smaller, more digestible package. College football is no different. And 3 things were passed, highlighted by clocks no longer stopping on first downs for the first time since 1968. So the clock will no longer stop after first downs in college football until the last 2 minutes of the second and fourth quarter. So both halves. Teams are also banned from calling back-to-back timeouts, and we will no longer have untimed downs to end the first and third quarter. If there's a penalty on the last play, they'll just push those to the second and fourth quarter, respectively. Obviously, the big headline, though, is the lack of the clock stop on first down. Garrett, I've seen a lot of mixed reactions to this. I know personally, this is a rule that I like. I think it will speed up the game pretty exponentially. And, it'll also get a lot of players ready for the next level when the clock does not stop on first downs in the NFL. Definitely going to take some getting used to, I think, in the first few weeks of this season, though.
It'll definitely take some getting used to. I think the thing that I've typically liked this rule just because I think it does give some diversity to the play calling style and what you can do on offense. So for example, right, if you're just a ball control offense and you're a strong running team, you have a built-in advantage because you're able to control the clock, really just control that time of possession, do what you need to do to keep the ball out of the other team's hands. Maybe you have a weaker defense. I don't know, just whatever the reason is that they have for being more of a ball control offense. Versus, for example, we've talked about like in the past with air raid offenses who, they might fizzle out real quick, or they could just, march down the field and, paper cut you to death. I think it takes a little bit away from the diversity there. I do think that you will see a little bit more of a uniformity in the way that you run offense. Not necessarily a bad thing, but similar to how in the NFL, there aren't a lot of different, like massively different schemes. You have coaches who are better at running offenses. You have better talent. But I don't think in the NFL you see as much of a different scheme or as much of a different approach from team to team, right? Some teams withstanding, obviously. Some teams are very different the way they run. I'm thinking teams like, the Baltimore Ravens, they're obviously a very run-heavy team. All that to be said, I do think it'll be good long-term to help speed the game up. At the time that they announced all these rules were rumored to come out, we mentioned that we thought the biggest thing you can do to speed up the game is to cut all these unnecessary commercial breaks.
Right. Yep.
And I still hold to that. I still think it would have been better to just say, hey, let's limit how many times you can cut away. Be like in basketball where you have certain times where you can take certain timeouts, and you have a certain like under 10 minute, under 5 minutes, something like that, instead of just cutting away to commercials all the time. So I think overall this will be just fine. Most of these rules I don't think you'll really even notice that much. And I'm not such a homer on the, hey, we got to stop the clock after first down, right? I'm not such a homer on that I think that, that has to happen. But I am curious to see where that goes. That's the only one that I think has a chance of maybe we go back on that at some point. But maybe people like it. Maybe people see what's happening in baseball with the retention, from, the pitch clock shortening games. Maybe we see that happen in college football, and people are more likely to want to stick around and watch a game.
Yeah, and I mean, I've today was my first MLB game with the new pitch clock rules, and even from watching it on TV, I was skeptical at first, but I absolutely love the pitch clock as a baseball fan. I think we were out of that game, Garrett, today in 2.5 hours. And it was
like 2.5 hours. It was great.
It was an exciting game. Lots of action, not stopping. I think we had one pitch clock violation on one of the teams, but yeah, I mean, I am all for more action and less stoppage. But you're exactly right. The biggest way to do that, which is unfortunately never going to happen with the way that these conferences and networks and schools make money, is cutting down on those commercials. That is never going to happen, in my opinion, unfortunately, because of how much money is involved. And we also, I think the other no-brainer is to take away the review system, because we stop every other play to review. And I get the booth-initiated reviews for targeting. That's probably not going away from a player safety standpoint, but do we really need to review if the ball was caught, an extra yard down the field to make it 2nd and 6 instead of 2nd and 7?
Right.
We really need, on the play that it was a catch for, I don't know, 4th and make it 3rd and 17 instead of 3rd and 27, or 4th and 27. Do we really need to review that? Make the coaches challenge it if they really care about it. If it's really that important, do exactly like the NFL does. It's a coach's challenge until the last 2 minutes of each half. Then it can be booth reviewed. All scoring plays and turnovers are automatically reviewed. So the biggest plays are actually, reviewed and can be stopped. But if it's just a completion, or if it's just a minuscule play in the scheme of things, make the coaches have to challenge that. Make them use a challenge and give them 2 or 3 per game, so that we're not stopping every 5 seconds for just ridiculous review purposes. That would be the best way to speed up the game. But stopping on first downs, I think, is a step in the right direction if we do want to speed up the process. So I don't know. Mixed reviews here from me. I think the other two are kind of no-brainers. Obviously, calling back timeouts is really unnecessary. Freezing the kicker doesn't really work anymore. It was novel in 2005, but we're way past that. And, the untimed downs, that was just stupid from the beginning. That was just kind of a rule quirk that I think we're finally getting out of a loophole. But before we move on, any other thoughts from you, Garrett?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think of the coach's challenge, I mean, it's a great point. Make the coach do something, right? Like, what's the point of the red hanky if you don't get to throw it ever, right? And it puts the coach in a position to think about, well, is it worth me maybe losing a timeout that I might want at the end of the half, especially in a second half game where you're like, do I want to challenge that one where it looked like he might have gotten a toe down in bounds, or maybe he barely slipped it outside, so it's not really a catch. It's put yourself in a position where you're putting the coach in a position rather to do something and to strategize. And if he's right, he's right. And then your guys upstairs get their money. You're making the guys upstairs work, and you're making everybody do their actual job.
Press box, put them to work for something.
Yeah, exactly. Because the other thing about it too is these coaches have a rooting interest in the game, right? They care about winning. These refs don't care. So if it's a little, they're going to just check it to make sure they do their job right, which I get. They want to do their job right. They don't want people coming back yelling at them after the fact that, oh, I couldn't believe you missed that. But that also takes it off the refs and it puts it on the coach. So you'd have less complaining about, in-game calls and, well, they should have reviewed that. I can't believe they missed that. And then you can put that on, well, the other team's coach messed it up.
And, we have the game within the game of the other team trying to snap the ball quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You can't blame the refs anymore. If it's a coach's initiated challenge, like, get your red flag out, brother. Come on, get it going.
Get it ready.
We got to get this thing going. And, you can't blame the refs for not buzzing in fast enough. If you're the other team, you can't there's no gray area, right? Like, I think some fans could probably point to examples in their own team's games where it felt like they snapped the ball, but the ref, we have this mysterious buzzer that apparently does that no one can see, but there's a red flag.
Whistled in halfway through the play.
Right. Or inadvertent whistles, whatever it could be. But if we have a red flag on the field, then obviously, that was there before the snap, or it wasn't there before the snap. So that's the biggest no-brainer to me. And we did not see that from this iteration of rule changes. Also, weird quirk was Division III is not on board with this. I don't know if you saw this, but Division III, kind of like unprecedented in college football. Division I and Division II are adopting the no clock stoppage on first downs. Division III kind of threw up the middle finger and said, we're going to keep doing it, and you can make us stop if you want to.
Good for you, D3. Stand up for yourselves.
Committing to the bit for Division III and just kind of being independent. So the article I read said it's kind of unprecedented, and we don't really know how that's going to work, but I guess credit to those schools for not bowing to the pressure from the other bigger divisions.
Was there a report of a middle-aged balding guy going, "There are dozens of us, dozens," doing that whole deal?
Yeah, no word on Tobias Funke, what he wants to do.
Who knows
here, but so we'll see how that plays out. It could be really interesting. Obviously, I honestly don't know if there's any cross-divisional matchups between D3 and D2. I'm sure there are, kind of like FCS, FBS, but could be interesting if you follow that super closely. But Garrett, closer to the bigger schools, we had a big weekend for spring football. As April draws to a close, these last couple weekends of April, typically really big for spring games. I talked about my experience at the Texas spring game a little bit. Last weekend, we had A&M. We had a plethora of other schools. But this weekend, some of the biggest names in college football took to the spring stage. Alabama, Notre Dame, LSU. We got to see Coach Prime for the first time at Colorado. We got to see Matt Rule for the first time at Nebraska. Let's just do a whip around here through these spring games. And after that, we will get into some more NFL draft coverage. But, starting at the top, I think Alabama, we talked about this, over the course of the last couple episodes, but Alabama has one of the most intriguing quarterback battles to me in the entire country coming into this year between Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson. Neither one really impressed yesterday in the spring game. No word on the weather conditions. I know that's a typical excuse from some fan bases.
It was windy, okay?
Could have been windy. We never know. But Simpson and Milroe combined to throw 3 interceptions, I believe, on about 62 pass attempts between the two of them. Neither one of them really did a lot to separate themselves in that competition. So, Garrett, I don't want to beat a dead horse here because I know we've talked about this quarterback competition, easy for me to say, before on this program. But, any takeaways from that performance that we got yesterday that kind of put that action on the field?
I mean, look, it just kind of goes to what we've been talking about, that, Alabama's – this is going to be the first time since, I think we said 2015, that they're not going to have a guy who's, all-world, won a championship or going to the NFL – top draft pick. Like, it's been a while since they haven't had a guy that reliable behind center. And that's going to be interesting to watch. Jalen Milroe, obviously, hasn't necessarily been impressive in the action we've seen him in so far. He's an absolute stud of an athlete. The kid can run. Kid is very physical, and he's made some good throws, obviously, but just hasn't necessarily been impressive as a pocket passer overall. Simpson, haven't still seen very much of him, but what we saw in the spring game, not necessarily impressed. Yeah, it's the spring. Yes, they're breaking in a new offensive coordinator. Yes, there's all those factors. Okay, all the things that you're going to say. Well, it's just because Tommy Rees just got here. We're just waiting for him to get his offense installed and da-da-da-da. But I think if you're Alabama fans, you have to look up and say, it's been a couple of years of watching Georgia win the national championship, and we're not too happy with that. It's been a couple of years since you've had that taste of glory. And it's funny to say, oh, it's been like 3 years. So, they're starting to get a little antsy over there, when most of our
A lot
teams
of fan
haven't won it.
bases would die to be in that position.
Yeah,
But
there's like 125 that haven't touched a national championship trophy in like a decade. So, or more than that for most of them. But, it just goes to show that the standard at Alabama obviously is different.
right.
Obviously, it's going to be a different standard for the greatest coach of all time, probably with Nick Saban. I think you have to look at this and be a little concerned. I think that's worth noting is that the quarterback situation isn't exactly there. Who do they have in the stable? I know Jahmyr Gibbs is out. Not as many running backs that I'm necessarily confident in. They have some good ones and some talent, but maybe not as many guys that I would say that's your top of the line guy. At the receiving core, I'm not necessarily as impressed with guys as I have been in the past. And so I think you just have to look around at Alabama and say, we're going to need some guys to step up as a team, get some real good coaching out of Nick Saban to get this team to be where it normally needs to be, especially with teams like LSU really coming up and looking really good. We'll talk about them in a second. Yeah. And especially knowing that you're going to have to play Tennessee, who's going to continue to look good. You might have a couple of losses on your schedule. And it feels weird to say talking about Alabama, right? It feels weird to say that about Alabama, but that might be where we are.
Yeah. And, I think this is not just from a quarterback perspective. We've really talked about that. We've kind of beaten that horse to death. The quarterback position, even when they were making the transition from Hurts to Tua or Tua to Bryce Young, you could look at the spring game and see, wow, that guy right there, he is obviously the heir apparent. He is going to take the baton. He is obviously going to be in the NFL in a couple years. First time since 2015 that we cannot say that about the guy playing quarterback for Alabama. We also, at every other position, I feel like just have more unproven talent than we have in close to a decade, probably, for Nick Saban's Alabama team. It's going to be fascinating to see if this staff can put together, I know they're going to be competitive, obviously, but a championship caliber run this season with all that unproven talent. Obviously, they have so many blue chips. They're still going to have one of, if not the highest blue chip ratios in the nation. Maybe Georgia might be a little higher. I haven't checked that statistic yet for this year, but it is going to be a situation that we haven't seen in Tuscaloosa in quite some time. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. I don't think a lot of those questions were answered this weekend. So going into the summer, going into the fall camp, it's going to be fascinating to watch the headlines come out of Tuscaloosa. Let's actually stay in the SEC West and talk about those LSU Tigers, because for all the questions that Alabama has, I think LSU has just as many answers right now, because the big knock on their offense was, can they be explosive in the passing game with Jaden Daniels? Well, all he did yesterday was go 10 of 11 for over 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. And you put in our notes, is he on Heisman watch in the spring? And I think the answer to that question is absolutely yes. Maybe one of the only players that could take it from him is his teammate on the other side of the ball, Harold Perkins, who just picked up right where he left off in the spring game. Unblockable at times last year and kept that up on Saturday. So, I mean, if you're betting right now, if you're putting your money right now on the SEC West champion, you're probably, if you're making a smart bet, it's probably on LSU, right? Not Alabama?
Yeah, LSU has to be the heavy favorite right now, especially after what Jaden Daniels just did. He's an absolute stud. They put together, I think there was like a 70-yard touchdown pass there somewhere, I think. I might be wrong about that. That might have been a different spring game, but regardless, he looked amazing. He looked like he picked up right where he left off. Harold Perkins, I mean, just an absolute beast right there. They had some really good linebackers. The one thing that, you look at the reports coming out of that spring game, not necessarily as strong at corner, which I know is typically a place where they play really, really well. I know there's a lot of turnover there. They've got a lot of transfers coming in, notably Denver Harris from Texas A&M going over to LSU to, kind of take a job there. We'll see kind of how that whole situation shakes out. Coach Kelly was not super pleased with the performance in the spring game. That might just have something to do with Jaden Daniels, though, right? That might just have something to do with the fact that he's a bad man. And I do think that if you're looking around just at the beginning of the season, you're looking for who's going to be the quarterback at the team that's going to be in the lead and playoff position. Those teams typically tend to have Heisman-type guys. How do you argue against LSU right now? I mean, I'm not necessarily afraid of Alabama if I'm LSU. There's nobody else in the SEC West that really scares me. I know A&M has lots of talent, but they've yet to prove that they're going to do anything with it.
Well, and a lot of that talent has just gone right out the window.
Oh, yeah, well, and a lot of it has gone out the window. You're right. No, and Arkansas, they have a quarterback coming back. Didn't play very well last year. Mississippi schools, they're going to be just fine, but we still got a lot to worry about at the quarterback position for Ole Miss, and who knows what that looks like. I don't think anyone's really afraid of Auburn right now, unfortunately. You just look around and you're saying, I don't know that we're necessarily scared of these guys on our schedule. You could see an LSU team, 9-0, 10-0 at the end of the season with Jaden Daniels steering the ship and prime Heisman candidacy. And when you look across the nation, they don't like to do repeats. So maybe Caleb Williams isn't that guy. I don't know. We'll see. But no, Jaden Daniels is absolutely on Heisman watch, and I think that LSU is absolutely in the driver's seat if they can finish the corner position. Right, that was the only real issue on that squad. They have good running backs. Noah Cain coming back. They're going to be stacked across the board, and they're going to be better on the inside. That was the real question coming out of last season, was in terms of the defensive tackles. There wasn't necessarily a whole lot there. They're a little bit small, a little undersized. Teams could sometimes run the ball on them. They're getting a couple guys back from injury, getting a couple guys in that are going to be a lot better on the interior. I think that they're going to be in for a huge season.
I'm right there with you. I think I was going back and forth on LSU, but I think I'm on the bandwagon now to fully back them as the post-spring penciled in SEC West champion. I think when we do our next 3-Tech Top 25, not sure when that's going to be, but they're probably going to be in the top 5 for all three of us, if I had to guess. Another team that stock is definitely up based on offseason acquisitions, Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Sam Hartman is probably the biggest high-impact transfer portal pickup, maybe in the entire nation, definitely at the quarterback position this year. And he now might have an explosive number 1 receiver in Jaden Greathouse, the early enrollee. Listen to Statline Garrett, caught 11 passes for 118 yards in his Fighting Irish debut. Obviously, that's coming from multiple different quarterbacks, and he'll just have Sam Hartman throwing. But, man, Sam Hartman just couldn't have been better on Saturday. 13 of 16 for 189 and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And he could be the piece that the Fighting Irish need to just really finally be explosive on offense. They've always had that identity of ground and pound, maybe hit the tight end for a big play or 2 per game, and then win on defense. But with Sam Hartman running the show on offense, I think that they could finally have that explosivity that could take them to the next level.
Right, and the big thing with them, obviously, losing Tommy Rees to Alabama, we just talked about him, they're going to be looking for something on offense. They got to figure out something to make the offense, tick, make things go better. I think bringing in some fresh blood, just saying, hey, let's see who's in here, plug some pieces in, see what happens. I think that's going to go a long way for Marcus Freeman's club. Marcus Freeman, he had all this hype coming into last season. They faltered a little bit, ended up with a good, sort of finish to the season, played a lot better than I think most of us expected them to towards the end of the season. And I think they're going to carry that into next year. Look, Jaden Greathouse, I don't know how he didn't get more offers and more committable offers to big-time programs. Good job with Notre Dame jumping on that early and getting in there, making sure they could get him to head on up there and play for Notre Dame. I gotta say, man, Sam Hartman, he is that guy, right? We talked about it with Jaden Daniels. Sam Hartman might be challenging him this year. The issue, obviously, for Notre Dame not playing in a conference, maybe not always having that good a quality of win. Their schedule, I can't remember what the schedule looks like this year. I don't have it up in front of me, but it should be a very winnable schedule for them with Hartman at the helm.
I've got it pulled up, and typically, yes, that is the knock on Notre Dame. That will not be a problem this year if they can run the table. They open with Navy in Ireland. They've got Tennessee State at NC State, Central Michigan, but then it gets really fun. Ohio State at home at Duke, who could be a dark horse ACC championship contender. At Louisville, Caleb Williams and USC at home before closing against Pitt at Clemson, Wake Forest at Stanford. So,
wow,
we've got a lot of opportunities this year, man. And I think Sam Hartman will be able to go toe-to-toe. He's shown it in the past at Wake Forest with lesser talent around him. Notre Dame is going to be one to watch this year. If they can navigate that schedule, even if they slip up one time, if they finish that schedule at 11-1, I think they're definitely a good shot for that number 4 spot in the playoff. a team that some other people have said could make a TCU-like run. I don't really see this, but we've been open about that before. But Colorado, man, I don't know how much we want to get into the game for sure. We can talk about Shedeur Sanders' performance yesterday, but if you haven't seen it, just look on Twitter for the video comparing the 2022 spring game to the 2023 spring game. You can count on your hands and feet the number of people in the stands in the 2022 spring game for Colorado. This year it was a packed house, not a lot of empty seats for a spring game. I couldn't tell you the last time there's been this much excitement in Boulder, probably when they won the national championship in 1990. And man, Coach Prime has that program just revved up to take a step forward this year. How big of a step remains to be seen, but the talent is definitely there. The coaching seems like it's going to be there. Now, the only thing that we have to question is how that'll compare to their Pac-12 schedule and facing a couple of tough non-conference tests. But man, the talent was on display yesterday, and he had Shedeur Sanders. I'll just get into the stat line real quick: 16 of 19 for 234 and 3 touchdowns, including a 98-yard touchdown pass. And he hit Travis Hunter for like a 70-yarder, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So, first touchdown of the game was the connection to Travis Hunter, guy that could play both ways for Coach Prime. You hear that name, you think he's probably going to be a defensive guy, but definitely getting a lot of reps on offense as well. I know we've beaten Colorado to death. I don't necessarily want to talk a lot about their expectations because we've talked about that a lot, but man, it's fun to have Colorado relevant again, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. And the big thing that I thought about that was the fans came out despite snowy conditions. Like they're having to wipe snow off of their seats. They had to get out there and like treat the field beforehand and everything. Like this was not a fun game from a weather standpoint to show up for. And the place was packed. I mean, it was 45,000 probably strong at a spring game for them, which is, I mean, massive numbers, especially
Better
compared
than a
to
lot of
last year.
SEC schools who are
Better than a
crazy
lot
enough.
of the SEC schools. And we've been critical of Shedeur Sanders. I don't know how much his play yesterday had to do with the fact that it was playing against Colorado's defense. I don't know how much that had to do with it. Probably a lot. But he did look really good. I mean, he looked like the kind of guy who should be warranting, Heisman consideration in the preseason. Now, again, I don't think that that's going to bear. I don't think that he will play at that level for the whole season. I'm perfectly willing to be proven wrong. If Colorado is, if we look up in Colorado's, 7-1 or something like that midway through the season, I'd be thrilled for a Colorado Renaissance tour. That'd be a lot of fun. Travis Hunter did play really well. He caught a little, nice in and out for a touchdown. Ran a really good route, just cooked his guy across from him. And then the 98-yarder went to, I can't remember which one, but one of the very few players that held over from the previous team. He stuck around. It was a blown coverage, just caught it wide open. I think he ran past a couple guys, kind of stuck a guy real quick, and then got in the end zone. So a lot of fun, at least on display for Colorado, which I think is what they need. They just need something fun to root for, something to be there for. We saw it firsthand a couple years ago. That fan base will get up for a big game. They will show up if the team has something to root for. Give them something to root for. We'll see what can happen. I think that I would slide them at least up out of the cellar in the Pac-12 and put them on like the maybe lower middling type team, which, might be fighting for barely a bowl eligibility type of thing, which already is a huge step in the right direction for Deion Sanders in Colorado.
Yeah, and that is a passionate, rowdy fan base when the Buffaloes are winning, even when they're not winning. It's a very passionate, rowdy fan base, but there's just more of them showing up when they are winning. So I'm excited to see what the Buffaloes can do in year one. A lot of opportunities to, prove themselves very early. Week 1 and week 2 at TCU and hosting Nebraska, the former Big 8 and Big 12 rival in Boulder. I think they get one of those two games. I think Nebraska is definitely more likely, but I think they're going to get at least one of those two games and have a puncher's chance in the other one as well. So we'll see how that all shakes out. We'll see if there's any more portal additions or anything like that for Coach Prime before the season begins. But Garrett, the way more pressing matter at hand, spring ball's fun. Those are scrimmages. Now it's time for the main event of the football offseason. That is the NFL draft. We have some draft prop bets and predictions for you guys. Garrett and I are going to go back and forth predicting some of the popular prop bets. This is not financial advice. Let me just say that right now, but you can find these at your favorite sportsbook. My odds are from FanDuel, and they are shifting like crazy every day. So if you hear a number on this show, it was as of Sunday afternoon, the 23rd, and these are shifting like crazy every day as more mock drafts come out and more leaks that may or may not be true are coming out about what these teams plan to do. So, Garrett, let's jump into it. The first one we have on the board is the number 1 overall pick. Your top 4, I think the only 4 that were available on FanDuel were Bryce Young at minus 2,000, CJ Stroud at plus 1,000, Anthony Richardson at 2,500, and Will Levis at plus 4,500. The 4 quarterbacks that are expected to go in the first round. Garrett, any indication from your end, who are you taking with this pick?
See, if it were me, if I'm the GM of this team, I'm going to take CJ Stroud, which, if you've listened to the podcast, that's a little bit of a hot take maybe for me, because last season I went nuts on the fact that CJ Stroud could not handle the pressure. When the moment got too hot, he folded. And yet I'm still going to say that they should take him first. I do like the tools better. And I think we saw something different in that Georgia game when they're playing in the college football semifinal game. There was something else about his game. He was, confident. He took off and ran when he needed to, really effective with his legs, and really led them against a team that clearly was one of the best teams that we've seen in a long time. Those Georgia Bulldogs demolished TCU in the Natty. I think, they were a missed field goal away at midnight from winning a championship last year under CJ Stroud. And maybe that changes the calculus a little bit for the first overall pick, but I still think he's your best player overall. I know that's not how it shook out in the mock draft, but I think he's the best player. I think the tools are better. I think the intangibles are a little bit better. I know obviously Bryce Young, he's played extremely well throughout his career. I just think I've seen it a little bit more as CJ Stroud at the highest possible level. Haven't necessarily seen it as much out of Bryce Young. And that's pretty much all that I have to say about that. The one thing I will say, oh my God, please do not pick Anthony Richardson or Will Levis with the first overall pick, especially Will Levis. I get it if you fall in love with the numbers at the combine for Anthony Richardson, you just get caught up in the whirlwind there. Don't pick Will Levis. Don't pick Anthony Richardson. Don't make it too hard on yourself. You're picking a good quarterback from a good school, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, one of those two, fantastic, right? Your highest tier possible guy that you can pick. Don't pick the other two.
So is your prediction the Panthers will take Stroud number 1?
I do think that they will take Stroud. I think that he's the better player. I think he's the guy that you trade up to pick. And I think that that's overall where they're going to go. I mean, they had the whole scene of him kind of schmoozing a little bit with the brass for the Pan when they traded up. So I think that it's fair to say that that's who you go up and get. You don't go up and get a guy at number 1 giving up as much as they gave up unless you've had conversations and you know what the plan is. I think the plan was CJ Stroud from day one.
I'm going to go with Bryce Young. I think that seems to be the consensus. I know that's the boring pick for this segment, but I'm trying to get points here. So I'm going to go with Bryce Young. I know the knock is the height. I think that is Carolina's guy. And unless it's a really big smoke screen, it seems like the general consensus in the industry is that Bryce Young is going number 1 overall. Seems like the Panthers guy, CJ Stroud, depending on where you look, is going number 1 overall to the Panthers or even falling outside of the top 5 in some mock drafts. Now, the week of the NFL draft, if you followed this for any amount of time, you know that these mock drafts are total clickbait on some websites. Some of them, the ones that you see on Wednesday night and Thursday morning, are going to be less clickbaity, but this time right here, literally the weekend before the draft, is prime clickbait hot take season. So it's really hard to trust anything that you see, but CJ Stroud is going all over the place. For this pick and me picking, obviously the betting value would be CJ Stroud at plus 1,000, but I'm going to take Bryce Young for my just pick for this instance here. The really interesting thing is number 2 to the Houston Texans, because general consensus throughout all of the offseason was that they were going to take whoever Carolina, ends up being Carolina, but whoever trades up to Chicago, Houston's going to take the other quarterback. That team's going to take the quarterback. Houston will take the other one. But now we're hearing rumblings out of Houston that they might go defense at number 2. I've seen some draft experts even say that Tyree Wilson is the odds-on favorite to be landed by the Houston Texans at number 2. If you're looking at betting odds, Will Levis is actually the betting favorite. I'll let you guys do with that information what you will. But Will Levis is the betting favorite at -120, followed by Tyree Wilson at +300, Will Anderson at +500, CJ Stroud all the way down at +500. Bryce Young, obviously, if the Panthers didn't pick him, I think it would be a lock to go here at +2,500. Anthony Richardson at +2,500, and Jalen Carter rounding out the just long shot odds at +4,000. I'll go ahead and make my pick here. I think it's CJ Stroud. I think this defense is a smokescreen from the Texans. It reads like a classic draft week smokescreen to think, oh, we need to go defense. We need to go to that. Franchise is not taking a defensive player here. They loaded up on defense in last year's draft. Listen, Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson, I think, are generational talents at the defensive at edge position, but this team needs a quarterback, and they lost their last one due to all kinds of craziness breaking out. Even before they had Deshaun Watson, they know what quarterback purgatory is like, and they're currently in it with Davis Mills. So they are going to take their guy, CJ Stroud, and I think that's really good value right now to get him at +500.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. If it's me, I'm taking whichever the quarterbacks doesn't go first between Bryce and CJ. That being said, we're not talking about me. We're talking about the Houston Texans. And I don't have a lot of faith in their front office, if I'm just being completely candid. These are the people who sold away Hopkins and, Watt.
Watt, yep.
And they just sold them away for basically nothing. I mean, they got pieces back, obviously, but not worth what those generational, and also what it means for their locker room, to take your leaders out of the locker room and just send them away. I don't have a lot of faith in that franchise. I think that, and this is just my general feeling. Okay, so this is going off a complete whim right now. I kind of think that they want to take Caleb Williams next year. And
That's
so I think that they're going to take Will Anderson here. I think they're going to take Will Anderson, and I think they're going to go ahead and say, we couldn't pass up on this good of a defensive end. He's a once-in-a-lifetime type player. You're not going to pass up on him this time. They can take a tackle or a receiver in their next pick in the first or whatever it is, and they just keep going. And then I think that they're going to do another tanking season to get Caleb Williams, which, if you could guarantee that happens and that he looks the same way he looked this year, makes sense. Because if I could get both of those guys, that makes a lot of sense to me. Again, I don't trust this Houston Texans front office. If it were me picking, I'm taking whichever quarterback is left to me. Obviously, based on what I just said, I'm hoping it's Stroud. Right? I'd much rather get Stroud than Bryce at this point. But again, I don't trust the Houston Texans to pull the trigger on that one. If I was just going to go off of a what would it be funny, what's your Daniel Jones moment there, right? I'm going to say they pick Will Levis here because that'd be hilarious to watch them pick Will Levis with that number 2 overall pick and watch the fan base implode. So that would be my own personal kind of ha-ha moment. With it being said, I do think they take Will Anderson and they get their quarterback next year.
I think that's a fair point, and I think there's going to be a lot of teams in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes next year. If you listen to our mock draft show, that's why I had Arizona trading down and just kind of punting this year. And I think I had them, I can't even remember who I had them taking, but I had them taking, Gonzalez out of Oregon is who I had them taking when they traded down. But yeah, it would make sense. I think you've seen a lot of teams recently. I'm thinking of Jacksonville specifically, kind of building up the rest of the team before taking the actual generational quarterback. A lot of guys, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, I think they're going to be solid NFL quarterbacks, but not necessarily the generational talent that scouts are saying Caleb Williams is going to be. And also top to bottom, if you miss out on that number 1 pick, the quarterback class next year seems to be a bit deeper than the one this year. The top tier is a little bit deeper. So yeah, I don't mind that bet there. Will Anderson is definitely the top guy on the board. I think if I'm going defensive player though, all the rumblings seem to be Tyree Wilson going number 2 overall to Houston. I'm thinking Brian Broaddus out of Dallas, who is like our area's number 1 draft guy, has been saying his sources are pointing in that direction. Clint Storner, the former Arkansas QB who now covers the Texans in Houston, has been hearing a lot of the same things. So a lots of Twitter rumblings for the Texas Tech edge Tyree Wilson, if he goes number 2 overall, that is awesome for him. Like I would be so happy for the guy that started his career at Texas A&M and then just bloomed into an amazing prospect at Texas Tech. But we'll see. You're absolutely right to say, the team that literally fumbled away the number 1 pick this year by winning on the last week when they didn't have to, and it changed nothing. Could definitely mismanage the situation. So
yes,
we'll see what the Texans do at number 2. First defensive player drafted. I think your automatic pick based on your last one would be Will Anderson.
Right. I would take Will Anderson here for the first defensive player. To be clear, I think Tyree Wilson is the better edge player. I think he's much better on the edge in terms of rushing the quarterback, playing the edge, understanding your assignment there. I just think Will Anderson's a little bit more versatile. I think he does a few more things better. And I think that he's the type of guy that because he's played at Alabama, you like the pedigree there. And you like the fact that he's played at the highest level. You've seen him dominate the highest level. Whereas with Tyree, this isn't any knock on him, but he plays in the Big 12, hasn't necessarily played against a massive opponent in like a big bowl game. And while I do think he checks out to be the better edge player, I just think Will Anderson's a little bit more trustworthy with that, higher selection draft pick, wherever he ends up getting slotted, whether it is 2 or whether he gets picked, 3, 4, 5 somewhere along the way. So I just think I would trust that a little bit more, though. If I am the guy turning in the card, I'm full well knowing I'm turning in Will Anderson, and I might be kicking myself for not taking Tyree Wilson here in a good, 3 to 4 years.
And I think, and I'll go ahead and run down the full odds list. So Tyree Wilson is actually the odds-on favorite currently on Sunday afternoon to be the first defensive player drafted at -145. Will Anderson checks in at +125. Jalen Carter out of Georgia at +2,000. And then the consensus top 2 cornerbacks are both at +4,000. Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois and Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. I'm right there with you, Garrett. I think I'm going to bet. I'm going to be a little boring, and I'm going to take Will Anderson as well as the first defensive player to be drafted. Tyree Wilson, so much smoke coming out of him, and obviously the Texans could blow this up by taking him at number 2. But I think if you're a GM of an NFL franchise, more often than not, even the Houston Texans, who have been, run so poorly in their history as a franchise, even the Houston Texans front office, I think, thinks in the way that, hey, if I'm going to mess up, I'm going to mess up with the guy that everyone says should be the pick, right? And that's Will Anderson. That's been Will Anderson since, last fall 2021, when he really broke out onto the scene. Everybody was talking about him as a possible number 1 overall pick. So I think if you're going to go down as a GM, you can point to the fact that you picked the guy that the whole NFL was wrong. If you're wrong about Will Anderson versus Tyree Wilson, if you pick Tyree Wilson and it ends up blowing up in your face, and Will Anderson is just a generational talent, that's the kind of decision that gets you fired, not the other way around. So I'm going to go with Will Anderson there as the first defensive player drafted. Now we get into some really fun situations, and I don't know how much of these mock drafts you followed recently. Trade ups are the hot ticket right now in the last couple weeks. Let's talk about a couple. Our next 4, are player specific. So first one, we're going to talk Anthony Richardson. Which team will pick Anthony Richardson? We've got the Titans at +200, the Colts at +300, the Seahawks at +380, the Raiders at +380, the Texans at +1600. And the Lions at +2,000. You can bet on any NFL team, by the way, but those are the ones that just aren't total long shots. So, Anthony Richardson, the most polarizing prospect in this class. To me, I think he goes to a team that has their quarterback situation already pretty locked up for at least this year and is looking to build for the future. So to me, that's the Titans, that's the Colts, that's the Seahawks. In our mock draft, I had the Raiders trading up, who just got Jimmy Garoppolo to get him at number 4. They had them trading up to number 3 with Arizona to get him right after the first 2 guys were off the board. Trade ups are always tricky to predict, and that's the tricky thing with the Raiders. They are in probably the worst position to make this pick. I'm going to go with a different team to trade up, and that is going to be the Seattle Seahawks. I think that they really like Anthony Richardson. I think he fits their scheme. He fits what they want to do. Think about all the years we've had Russell Wilson just picking deep shots very carefully. Geno Smith did the same thing last year and was really, really good at it. Anthony Richardson and that offense that they run up there in Seattle, I think that might be the best actual fit in the entire NFL outside of maybe what Baltimore is doing. So give me Seattle. I think they make a deal to get it done. They jump up with division rival Arizona. That could be really tough, making that jump up, but he's not going to get past the Colts at number 4. So the safe bet might be the Colts.
Well, I mean, lead me straight into it. I'm going to take the Colts to pick him. I looked at an interview that the GM did recently, and he was kind of smokescreening a little bit, saying, well, I don't have any idea. These mock drafts, you never know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And that's not true. I think they all kind of know what the first couple teams are doing. I think the only question he has is who's going to want to make a deal at 3, right? He's trying to see who's making a deal at 3, who goes first.
Are they coming up for Levis or are they coming up for Richardson? Because that's a big debate as well.
Well, and also, I mean, if some of what we've been saying is true, there might be a defensive player taken in the top 2, which means that Stroud is still available to go trade up for.
Yeah,
and I think in most scenarios, whether a defensive player gets taken at number 2, whether it's, Bryce and Stroud going off the board in whatever order in the top 2, and somebody tries to make a deal here, whatever order it is, I think the most likely bet is he ends up in Indianapolis. Yeah. And I think that that's a great fit for him, by the way. I think that him being able to kind of sit for a little bit, I don't want to say Patrick Mahomes, but the same thing that he did where he sat behind a team with, a lot of really good pieces and just kind of learned for a year. I think that could go really well for him, especially given the tools that he does have. And I honestly hope that happens for him because I know that with the Colts, getting kind of left at the altar by Andrew Luck when he decided to retire a little prematurely, I know that they felt pretty bad about that. So I'd like to see the Colts be able to get back to an exciting time where they have a quarterback they can be excited about and something to build towards the future with. I think that'd be a lot of fun for that franchise. And I think that they would be my favorite. I know that the Titans are currently the favorite. Maybe there's just a lot of, noise that they're going to move up to take him.
Titans want to trade up. That's the general consensus.
Sure. I just think if you're Arizona, right, because they're at 3 right now, right? It's Arizona.
Arizona's at 3.
If you're Arizona, I just think there's too many solid players. And if you're looking at, okay, well, I want to get my quarterback next year. Do I want to take some kind of draft capital, or do I want to maybe try a Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson, or even a Jalen Carter? There's several good players that you can take at 3 that I don't think anyone would blame you for taking. So if they're not going to sweeten the pot, I don't know that they're going to necessarily move out for that. And I don't think they're taking a quarterback this year. So I'm picking Richardson to go to the Colts.
That's a great pick. I think that's the safest bet here because all the other ones rely on trade downs or Anthony Richardson just taking a free fall from where most people have him drafted. So, yeah, I think that's a really great pick. I still love Seattle to trade up here. I'm going to take a little bit of a gamble. But, man, if the Texans take a defensive player at number 2, Arizona's phones are going to be ringing off the hook. For that number 3 pick to come up and get
someone will come up to get Stroud or Bryce if they're not taken in the top 2. Someone will come up to get, and then in that case, you're still probably getting Richardson to the Colts. So
yeah,
I think it works out that way. I think the Colts, if you're Colts front office, you are begging to hear Will Anderson's name come off the board to Houston.
Yeah, or anybody that's not CJ Stroud, really, because that's going to just open up a world of possibilities for you if you're Indianapolis. Let's go to Bijan Robinson, the consensus RB1 in this draft. Who's going to pick him? Falcons plus 240, Texans plus 750, Eagles plus 750, Washington Commanders plus 850, Cowboys plus 1,000, Bears plus 1,000, Titans plus 1,400, Lions plus 1,400, Patriots plus 1,800, and Chargers plus 1,800. Garrett, I'll let you start with this one. What's your bold prediction for Bijan?
So I'm going to go a little off the beaten trail. Every single mock draft it seems like we've done so far sends Bijan to the Cowboys. And personally, as a Dallas Cowboys fan, I would love to see that happen. With that being said, he has to get there first. I don't know that he does.
All the reports this week have said that the Cowboys are looking to trade up to get Bijan possibly.
Trade up to get Bijan. That's funny. And I'll leave it there for now. That's Jerry Jones being Jerry Jones. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and pick him to go to the Commanders. Okay. I think that's probably where I would slot him in, mostly just because I don't think I can justify the Texans taking him if they're not taking a quarterback. Like and they might take a quarterback, obviously, but I've picked them to not take a quarterback in this situation. So if they're not taking a quarterback, I can't really justify sending a running back there. I
Well,
think
and
they're
the
another
Texans.
safe pick.
So the Texans, I think that's based on they do have 2 first-round picks this year.
Right.
You can't, yeah. So I think it's
I'm not
based
saying it too, obviously. I'm saying in their second pick, wherever that is,
on the
if they do
clarify, yeah.
take Will Anderson there, if you're a team that's already taken, like, let's say Will Anderson, like I picked him to take, I don't think you can justify taking a running back in the first round at that point. I think you have to go take a safer bet or a better decision type of play. I think that's what the draft sort of checks out to be if that's you. And then I don't think the Eagles would take him, obviously, just because I think that they have plenty of running backs. I think they're going to go a different direction there anyways. Falcons are on there. I don't see that as well. I think Falcons have so many other needs at this point besides running back. They've got a lot of work to do in Atlanta, and so I'm going to pick them to go to the Commanders. I think that they have a lot of really good, talented pieces. They don't really have that running back. I know they have a lot of pieces that they like, but obviously picking Bijan is going to send them over the top and give them their running back. And again, you can make the comparisons. When their coach was in Carolina, he used Christian McCaffrey that way. Is this going to be his new Christian McCaffrey type? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. And, the Washington Commanders, if they want him, they will have the opportunity to take him before the team that I'm going to pick. I'm going to go with kind of a long shot, but a team that is really needy of a running back. I'm going with the Los Angeles Chargers here.
Wow.
Maybe this is just a fantasy football trade talking that really wants to put Bijan in that offense. But, man, the Chargers, if you follow the NFL at all, you know that Austin Eckler asked for a trade. They couldn't find a trade partner. And this is going to be his last year in LA. So the natural transition, the Chargers will be taking a running back in this draft, in my opinion, somewhere. And I think if he is on the board at, I'm pulling up the order right now. If he is on the board at 21, they're taking him. And if he's not, they're probably going to take a tight end. So I have them in our mock draft. We had them passing on Bijan. I think if that situation was in real life, they would be taking Bijan Robinson and running that pick up to the podium. But obviously the Commanders are there on the clock before the Chargers, so they could really muddle up that plan for me. Garrett, next one is a simple yes or no question. Will Hendon Hooker be a first-round pick?
It hurts me to say it. I'm going to say no. I think he should be. I honestly think he deserves to be. People act like he's not the guy who is the obvious frontrunner for Heisman lighting things up last year. I know that he hurt himself. I know he's a little older. That doesn't affect me, right? I think if you're looking for a quarterback, especially because this isn't Brandon Whedon we're talking about here,
Right.
okay? He's not that old. I understand he's like the same age as Lamar or something like that.
Yeah.
I understand that. At the same time, you get a guy who can sling it like that. You're on the back half of this, first round. You might be a team in need for a quarterback. You might be a team maybe not even in need for a quarterback, but you've got an aging quarterback who, is past his prime, looking for a replacement. Go draft Hendon Hooker. There's worse players you can draft. I don't think he gets drafted in the first round, but I hope for his sake that he does. I would hate to see him slip out of the first round after the amazing season he had last year.
I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say yes because of the way the NFL does rookie contracts. Because if you draft someone in the first round, you get them for 5 years. If you draft them in the second round, you get them for 4. So
right.
He's not slipping past the second round, in my opinion. When I look at the board, I see New England, I see Washington, I see maybe Pittsburgh, depending on how they feel about Kenny Pickett, and Tampa Bay in the teens as teams that could definitely take this, or Seattle if they strike out on the quarterbacks in the first round or the top 10.
Right.
So I say yes. I think there's enough teams that are willing to do it. And I think if he would have, I think teams are starting to say to themselves, if this kid doesn't get hurt in the middle of the season, he's a bona fide first round pick. Age is literally the only concern with Hendon Hooker. So I'm going to say yes. I think he is the surprise extra quarterback taken somewhere in the back half of the first round. And
he would be fantastic in Tampa Bay.
Right. No, yeah. I don't think Kyle Trask is the answer there. And they have not made a lot of other significant moves at that position. And, clearly Tampa Bay doesn't care about age at the quarterback position. So
they bought Tom Brady well past his prime.
Yeah. And they got a Super Bowl out of it.
They did.
I think that number 19 pick in our last mock draft, we had Brian Breesy out of Clemson penciled into Tampa Bay. But listen, if Hendon Hooker is there at 19, which he might be, probably will be, I think Tampa Bay, it's going to be hard for them to pass up on that with their current quarterback situation. Let's go to the last player-focused one, Garrett. Let's talk Stetson Bennett, because the odds for him to be drafted, you can pick which round he will be drafted in. I'm not going to read through all the odds, but Garrett, just quick prediction. What round is Stetson Bennett drafted in?
I'm going to give him 6.
Okay.
He deserves more than that. I'm going to give him 6th round because it seems like nobody wants to draft this guy. And this is still maybe the most insane thing to me. I just got finished talking about Hendon Hooker and obviously him being as good as he was. Stetson Bennett, he's won back-to-back national championships. This guy, all he's done is win in his college career. He did it at a place that hadn't done it in 40 years. Yeah, Georgia's been good, but I mean, they hadn't won a championship in 40 years. He wins back-to-back for them. He's established them as a dominant player, maybe the new dynasty in college football. And he's going to walk out the door, and they're going to say, I don't know. He's not that big. He's not that strong. He's not that fast. He's fine. There's no problem with Stetson Bennett. I get that he was a walk-on, and he got a scholarship out of that. Guys prove to you when they deserve it or not. This guy has absolutely proven that he deserves it. With that being said, I don't know why you don't take a flyer. Even if he gets all the way to the end of the draft, why don't you take a flyer on him? If he's Mr. Irrelevant, take a quarterback who can show up in your locker room, who knows how to win, who knows what it takes to win a championship, and who will be good for at least the culture around the people around him, right? He's a hard worker, obviously as a walk-on. He's got to work hard and earn a spot. So he's not going to come in there feeling entitled or feel like he's got to, be the guy in the locker room. He's just going to go in there and be a good locker room presence. Why not take that guy in the 7th round at the very least? I think he goes a little higher than that. I'd pick him in the 6th round, especially if I'm a team where my quarterback's maybe not 100%, or maybe I like my quarterback, but I'm in a bad contract situation and he's, kind of stuck there. I might pick Stetson Bennett just to put a fire under that quarterback's button, see what they can do to fix their quarterback situation.
I'm going to take 5th round. I'm going to go a little bit earlier than that. I think that there's going to be a market for Stetson Bennett. He will not go undrafted, in my opinion. Freezing cold takes protected. But I don't think that he's going to go undrafted. Garrett, you're right. Like, Mr. Irrelevant last year was Brock Purdy. He's starting in the playoffs and winning games and getting a team to the NFC Championship. So
right.
Mr. Irrelevant can be very relevant. I don't think there's going to be a team that really wants Stetson Bennett and does not want to let him fall to free agency after the draft and risk not getting him. So someone will draft him. I'll take the 5th round just for the betting odds value at plus 500, but 5th, 6th, 7th, he will go in one of those rounds. Garrett, last rapid fire one, just fun one for us. Position of the Cowboys' first drafted player, whenever that might be. I'll let you have the floor.
Look, in terms of just positioning, because I'm a Cowboys fan and there's things that I'd like to see happen, I know that Jerry is just not going to do any of that. And Jerry Jones lives to see us miserable. I'm going to say that he's going to pick another O-lineman, but it's going to be a guy that we don't like. It's going to be a guy that's got bad hands, something like that. It's going to be a slow guard that he wants to play at tackle, who gets a lot of holding penalties or something like that. I don't know. I'm just not convinced that Jerry likes his fans. And so I'm going to say he takes an O-lineman. Now, this doesn't mean that the Cowboys don't need an O-lineman. I would love to see them take a good, skilled, talented O-lineman. I just think he's going to pick one that we don't like and give us nothing to cheer for and nothing to make us happy. So, Jerry, prove me wrong. Otherwise, I'll see which card you decide to turn in this year.
I'm going to go the other side of the line of scrimmage. Defensive line is a huge need. Tight end is the betting favorite right now at plus 175. I think these tight ends are talented enough to maybe not be there at 26. And
there's a good chance, yeah.
The ones that might be there are guys like Luke Musgrave and a couple other project guys. So I don't think that they want to use a first-round pick on those guys. I think Kincaid and Mayer are going to be gone already by the time 26 comes around. So unless there's a trade-up, I'm going to go defensive line. There's some solid guys that they could get in the back of the first round there. So we're going D-line for me. Garrett, this was a lot of fun. You got any big plans to watch the draft this weekend? I know our draft star Mitch is going to be locked in from
Oh, we
picking.
know Mitch is going to be locked in for sure. I'm excited to watch it. This will be towards the end of my, because we both teach, this will be towards the end of my semester for a class that I teach. So will be very nice to kind of unwind, relax a little bit, watch the draft, and see what happens. We might have something in the works to watch the draft and at least do a little bit of draft coverage with you guys, but stay tuned if you want to see what happens there.
Stay tuned. Absolutely. Well, for that man over there, Mr. Garrett Turney, I am Trey Reeves. It's been a pleasure with you guys. We'll see you next time, and we will talk some more NFL draft and all the headlines of college football as usual. See you next time, guys.
Gracious, how about that?